and what actually does that look like. And so will you guys please welcome Coy as he comes up to wrap up today's study.
Mitchell's description of the baseball game, he said, we will have food and drinks. So let me clarify drinks for everybody. Even though we will be in the suite, we will have soft drinks. If you want other kind of drinks, you're going to have to go to Mitchell's house before or after. And he will personally provide those drinks. That's funny. As Mitchell said, we are wrapping up a study that we've been in for several weeks now. And it is based on a book by a professor, a church historian, a theologian, a person who's written quite a bit of books on different parts of the Bible. And it's called Knowing Our Faith. And the purpose of this study that I have put together is to help all of us have a better understanding of what it is that we believe. And so my goal in writing each message is to offer you something that could give you greater clarity on beliefs that maybe you have been told are really important to hold. And so I've talked about different doctrines each week. And so today we're going to wrap it up and talk about our understanding of a doctrine that maybe you've never heard of before in regards to the term that I'm about to say. But I promise you've thought about it in some form, and that is the doctrine of eschatology. Eschatology. And if I spelled it for you, you'd be like, I don't know how to say it. So it's eschatology, and that is the study of something, right? Ology is the study of something, and so escha is the last time. So it's the study of the last times. Another way to think about it, really, in the history of the church and theology, is it's more about the study of what the future holds. So let me talk about it with you today. First, is Tori in the room? Yep, I see Tori over there. On the count of three, we all say happy birthday to Tori because it's her actual birthday today. So let's embarrass her because my staff embarrasses me all the time. So if it's like a chance to get them back, let's do it. So on three, just say happy birthday. You don't have to sing it. Just say it. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday. Yeah. Oh, there we go. See? I should have had you guys do that while you're on stage. Well, eschatology, even though it's a strange term, is a doctrine that has often been associated with what people have referred to or think it refers to as the end times, which is about fear. So if you grew up in the church, I don't know, how many of you grew up in the church? If you were somebody who grew up in the church, now let me ask you a different question. If you were a teenager or an adult in the 90s and you went to church, if you were a teenager or an adult who grew up in the 90s and you went to church, then it's probably likely that you heard of the Left Behind series. If you've heard of the Left Behind series, shake your head yes. Most of you in this room. Well, the Left Behind series, let me tell you a little bit about it if you don't know what it is. It is a book series that was turned into a movie series that is a fictional story. Let me emphasize this. I can't enough. It is a fictional story. It is not theology that's grounded in the history of what we know about what God's word says. It is a fictional story that is grounded in fear of what's referred to as the rapture. Ooh, the rapture should give you chills. Anybody get chills when you hear the word rapture? The premise of the story is built on terror, and it's the terror of this supposed disaster that's coming. And if you are somebody who is not fit for this disaster, then you are left behind. Like if you're not one of the people who make the cut, and that's what it felt like if you watched Left Behind. If you're somebody who did not make the cut and get rescued and taken to heaven, then you are somebody who's not only abandoned to earth, according to the story, then you are somebody who has to endure 7 years of what? You all know this story better than I do. 7 years of tribulation. And then tribulation is this really awful, catastrophic series of events that nobody wants to have to face. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. Like, this is something that has been studied. This is something that has been named. The Left Behind series and the idea of the message that came with it has generated what's called rapture anxiety. Some of you have rapture anxiety. I have a friend who has rapture anxiety. When he thinks about the end, he gets nervous. He becomes scared. Like it's fear. It's something that he fears is like, what happens when I get to the end? Will I go to heaven or will I go to hell? Like that's kind of the idea of rapture anxiety. I don't know what's going to happen, and I want to make sure that I escape this really terrible reality that has been put there out there into the world that I may have to experience. It's like 1 second your dad is pushing the lawnmower, and then all of a sudden, poof, he's no longer there. And the lawnmower is still running. And I use that example because that's what I was afraid of when I was a kid for some reason. I always thought if Jesus comes back and takes people with him to heaven, it's going to be my dad, and he's going to be leaving the lawnmower, and I'm going to have to pick up the lawnmower and keep mowing the grass. And these perspectives, like the Left Behind series, what they have done, and this is really important for you to hear me say, is they have emphasized explaining or predicting the end times. That's what it has done. And so it produces claims. And here are some of the claims that it produces. It produces claims about the exact date and time of Jesus' return. Have y'all ever talked to somebody who believes they know when Jesus is going to return? I went to this specific surfing spot on the south side of Cocoa Beach. I don't know if you drive over to Cocoa Beach. It's the section as you're coming south out of Cocoa Beach, just north of Patrick Air Force Base. And the road was split, and then it comes into one road. So like going north and coming south was split with houses in between, and it comes back together. And you go south, and Taco City's right there. Anybody heard of Taco City? Nice little taco shack that's local right there. I would surf at a spot not far from there, and there were these two guys that would show up in this white van all the time. And isn't that always like the scary thing? It's like, if there's a stereotype of scary people, it's scary people in a white van. And these two people were a son and a father. And I'm not sure which one was the son and which one was the father, because I'm pretty sure they both hadn't bathed in a really long time. I know they hadn't shaved their beards in a year and cut their hair. And they would always be the first ones to park there. And if you go there and surf enough, you realize that if you see the white van, you have to be careful how you get out of your vehicle. Because you want to make sure that you get your surfboard out of the vehicle, put the wax on, put the leash on, take your sandals off, whatever else you need to do to prepare to go get in the water, in a timing so that you don't have to run into them. Because if you run into them, they're going to stop you, and they're going to tell you how they know when Jesus is going to return. And how they would tell you is they would go through all of these numbers that I have no clue how people could make sense of. I don't know. I guess YouTube can probably, like if you looked at YouTube, you could probably find these numbers somewhere. But they were like telling me all these secret codes that they had found in the Bible, and they were telling me when Jesus was going to return. And if you did not get past them, that's what you heard every single time. And all they wanted you to do is to stop with them, repent with them, and agree with them that they knew when it was going to happen. And as nutty as that may sound, like this idea that that's something that we need to study is a claim that started to be made in the world. Like we can decide when it's going to happen, and we can tell you exactly what it's going to be like. Those are some of the claims. Other claims that were made coming out of this idea that we need to focus on these things are claims about ancient prophecies that are being fulfilled in current events, and there's claims about the type of disasters that will mark that the end is near. How many times growing up in church did somebody say to you that something happening in the Middle East was the sign that we were, like the world was coming to an end? How many times did y'all, like, am I the only one that grew up in that culture? It's like this thing happened, and so everybody pack your bags, even though your bags don't go with you when you get raptured to heaven, evidently. We get new bags when we get there. The problem with all of that, and I know I may be rocking the boat for some of you, and that's okay. I hope you come back. But the problem with all of that, and by all of that, I mean the emphasis on this idea that we need to fear this idea of the end times. The problem with all of that is that it doesn't fit in line with the Bible, nor what Jesus himself says. To a large degree, the idea that has been given to us through fictional stories, specifically through things like the Left Behind series, is problematic because it gives us misinformation that makes us misunderstand what people have studied about the doctrine of eschatology for hundreds and thousands of years. Because this is why. Eschatology is not a matter of predicting every detail about the future in order to provoke fear. Rather, it is a matter of hope based on a future that is in God's hands. It is a belief that tells us that despite the evil that we see in the world, and despite the challenges that stand in the way, God's love ultimately wins. What we're told through the study of eschatology is that God's love will someday make a reality for us where everyone's need is supported and nobody's care is neglected. In really super simple terms, the doctrine of eschatology is an assurance of hope, not fear. So to understand better what you believe, then I encourage you to listen to the message of hope. And so to do that with you today, I want to read a couple passages that echo to us this idea of hope in the future. So go with me to the book of Micah first, chapter 4. Then we'll go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 11, starting with verse 6. Now, you may be wondering, why, Coy, would you talk about the study of last things based on a passage in the Old Testament? Because most of you are anticipating me going where? To the book of Revelation. But the reason why I'm using passages from the Old Testament is because I want you to know that the message of hope is old. It's not new. It shows up in the very last book of the Bible, but it's been showing up from the beginning. It showed up the moment that Adam and Eve decided to take from the tree. From that moment, that is the beginning of the story of God saying, I will restore things. I want to give you hope. And so it shows up in the prophets. It shows up in almost all the stories where God intervenes in a way that says, I'm not leaving you or abandoning you or leaving you to yourself. So this is what it says in Micah chapter 4, starting with verse 3. It says that God shall judge between many peoples and shall arbitrate between strong nations far away. This is describing God being in the role of having dominion over all the peoples of the world. God shall judge between many peoples and shall arbitrate between strong nations far away. They shall beat their swords into plowshares. If I translate that today, it would be like they melt their guns down to butter knives. Their weapons are turned into something that then can create something good. Rather than destroy, they're taking those devices that create destruction and turning them into something that cultivates something good. And their spears, they will turn into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore, but they shall sit under their own vines and under their own fig trees, and no one shall make them afraid. For the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken. That's the future the Bible promises the people in the book of Micah. I think it would be amazing if God could make that happen now. Don't you all agree? I would love to not be in war with any other nation. I would love to not be at war with anybody in my family. I would love to not be at war as an Ohio State fan against every other football team in the nation. I wish we could just all be friends and realize that Ohio State is the best. And maybe someday the Gators will get there, but I doubt it. Yeah, I knew y'all were going to say something. So go with me. We hear that word from the book of Micah. Go with me to the book of Isaiah. And I want you to have an imagination for the words that Isaiah gives to us. And this is speaking to a people who are living in circumstances that aren't great. I'm going to back it up a little bit. You're not going to get it all on the screen. And I may read a little bit more. I'm going to start in verse 1 because it says, a shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse. That is talking about David. If you know the story of David and Goliath, that David, the one who slays this giant and eventually becomes king, it says a shoot shall come out. Because they described this stump that was cut down to the ground and they were thinking it was hopeless. There's no way it could raise up again, but God says a shoot will come out from that stump. There's hope. And then he describes that shoot that comes out of the stump and gives life back as this son who will come from Jess. And it says, a branch shall grow out of the roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide by what his ears hear. And now he's referencing the future of Jesus coming to earth. But with righteousness he shall judge for the poor and decide with equity for the oppressed of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. And this is where I want you to hear. It says, the wolf shall live with the lamb. Wolves don't live with lambs unless they're deciding to consume them. But it says in the future, the wolf shall live with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the kid. The calf and the lion will feed together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze. Their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. That means your mom and dad will finally get along someday. The Bible gives us a vision of a future that is hopeful. In the 90s, the youth group that I attended included about 15 to 20 regulars. We were a small church. I think we were a church of 200 or 300, and it was in a small rural town, and there were about 15 to 20 of us who would attend youth regularly. And I can tell you, I don't remember any messages or sermons or lessons that were taught. And I'm not trying to cut on my youth pastor. I just don't remember them. But what has stuck in my memory are some really strange moments. One of those moments is when I walked into the youth room, and I wasn't expecting it to be remodeled, and it was having a new setup, which is really in the fellowship hall. Y'all remember fellowship halls? We don't have one here. We don't have a big enough building, but there were fellowship halls where we would have potlucks, and kids could run around, and their parents could go somewhere else and just let the kids destroy each other while they were in the fellowship hall, because it wasn't the sanctuary, and we weren't allowed to run in the sanctuary, but we were allowed to run in the fellowship hall. The youth room was in the fellowship hall, and I walked in, and there was a new setup, and the new setup had this display of T-shirts, and it was a display of my first experience and encounter with Christian T-shirts. I had never heard of a Christian T-shirt before. And I had walked in, and all of these Christian T-shirts, they were based on parodies of things in pop culture. So let me explain one of them to you. There was a T-shirt that was based on the logo of Gold's Gym. Y'all remember the Gold's Gym shirt? At one point, they were really popular. Everybody wanted a Gold's Gym shirt. I don't know why. I can't remember. Something in culture made everybody want a Gold's Gym shirt. And so they took that design, and they altered it to say, Lord's Gym. Gold's Gym, now it's Lord's Gym. And it had an image of a really muscular Jesus on it. I should have gotten a photo. I should have got an image of it. It was a really muscular, good-looking Jesus. Still had the long hair, and there was this very large, heavy cross on his back. And the design was very intentional, so that this cross had laid on Jesus' back and put him on the ground so that he was in a push-up position. And the tagline with this Christian T-shirt, I gotta read it so I don't mess it up. The tagline with this Christian T-shirt that was like the Gold's Gym was, sins pressed upon him, he lifted them all. Right. I've seen a new one. I've seen a new one at the gym recently. I think I know what church they're coming from, but I'm not going to say it. There's a T-shirt that I've seen people wearing. It's sort of like the Gold's Gym, It has another strong version of Jesus on it, and it says the ultimate weight, ultimate deadlifter is what it says, the ultimate deadlifter. Oh, we do have the shirt on there. Yeah, you see it right there. So that was one of my strange experiences, and I will tell you, like, I start to feel really nervous, and my neck gets tense when I think about, like, were those shirts, some of them? Big Johnson shirts, y'all remember this? I think it was retaliation. So that was one strange moment that I remember in my youth group in the 90s. Another strange moment that I remember was at church camp. And if you grew up at church camp, you know there are strange moments that happen in church camp. And so it was a group of my buddies and I, and we were in a really cold, block cabin by ourselves where all the beds are shoved into every available space as possible. And for whatever reason, I can't remember, but our youth leaders had a meeting or something to go to, and so we were left in the cabin by ourselves. I believe that we were late middle school, maybe early high school, but we had the space all by ourselves. And we decided to do with our time a shared reading out loud of the book of Revelation. And you would have thought that we were reading a forbidden book of spells or curses, because most of the guys in the group, their face looked terrified as we were about to do this. We huddled around, got into this circle, and their faces were blank, and their voices were shaky, and everybody looked tense, like they were about to get up and run if they needed to, or go find somewhere to hide. And one of us in that group, he was extra terrified. His anxiety level was at like this height that nobody else could reach. Like, he was really nervous. He was starting to feel anxious, and we weren't sure that he was going to be okay, but it's a group of young guys, and we're like, we're going to see what happens. And so we continue with this process of deciding we're going to read the book of Revelation together. And so we start reading it out loud. And within seconds, this young guy with us starts to tell us that he's feeling nauseous. So what do you think a group of guys are going to do? We keep reading it. And he got so nauseous, he stood up and kind of started pacing the room, and so we kept reading it. And the longer we read it, the more nervous he got, and eventually he ran out of the cabin, ran down the road, and went to the public bathroom, where I'm assuming he relieved himself from all the pressure he felt in his stomach. But here's what I want you to know about that strange moment. For the group of us young guys in that cabin that day, what we believed was shaped by something that tied us to fear of this concept of the end times, which I'm going to tell you didn't help our understanding. If anything, it limited it. And so what I want to safeguard you all from today is having a limited understanding of what God tells us about the future that we get to step into. And so to help you better understand this idea of eschatology and this theology, here's what I suggest you do. Base your belief on the hopeful future that you can anticipate. And what I mean by that is, let the basis for what you believe be influenced by where we are headed as a people, which is toward a future that is in God's hands. To help you make sense of this, I know you all are going to be able to follow me. Like, when you decide to leave your house, you make directional decisions about where you are going. Like, where you anticipate, where you want to end up will determine the path that you take. So that if you decide after church that you're hungry, which most of you are, like hearing a message isn't enough food for you, so you need to go out and get some real bread. And so you leave church and you're ready to get some food. And so what if, as you leave this place, you think to yourself, I just really need a good fried chicken sandwich. That's where I want to go. And you know that you can get one at Lovebird. And maybe there are other places in town, but I would say probably the best chicken sandwich you can get in town as far as I have tasted. And you think, I can go get that at Lovebird. If you decide that's what I desire, that's what I want, and I know I can get it there, that will shape the path that you take. In a similar way, if you desire a hopeful future and know that's what God promises, then that expectation gets to shape the way that you believe. Rather than base your belief in fear that overwhelms you with anxiety, your belief gets to be based in hope that frees you to live with the expectation of the good that God promises the future holds. In Acts chapter 1, verse 6, when the disciples asked Jesus about the specific date and time when the kingdom would be restored, what does Jesus say to them? Anybody remember? It's not for you to know. But come on, Jesus, like, you just resurrected from the dead. We thought you were gone. They were overwhelmed with fear in that moment. And then Jesus reappears to them and assures them that death doesn't get the victory, that God gets to have the final word. And so Jesus shows these disciples to give evidence of the resurrection, the scars in Jesus' own body. I don't know if you've ever thought about that theologically, that when God raises Jesus from the dead, he doesn't give him a brand new body. He gives him the body that bears the scars. Like, side note for me, it's like the scars in your life of the things that you have gone through aren't things that God necessarily wants to erase. It's like evidence of God's work in your life. When you could show people the scars on your heart and on your soul and on your physical body and say, but by the grace of God, I wouldn't be where I am today. And that's what happens with Jesus, but to an ultimate level. Like, death thought it had gotten me down forever, but here I am. And Jesus restores to them an idea of things aren't hopeless. And then they're like, okay, so the kingdom's going to be restored. And so they want Jesus to tell them, when is it going to be? And Jesus says, it is not for you to know. But it is set. Jesus doesn't say, hey, disciples, I want you to know about this really scary future that you're about to step into so that you're afraid enough to follow me. He says the kingdom is going to be restored. And I want you to follow that hope all the way to its end, believing that that's the thing that will keep you in relationship with me, because you will trust that where I'm leading you is where you will want to end up. That is totally different than the concept of the end times that tries to scare you into heaven. Jesus tries to love you into heaven. And he promises a future where God has dominion over all things and evil has no more say. And that is the future that God promises. So what we see in Jesus' words in the book of Acts is that what's uncertain are the details, but what's assured is the result. And so as we close today, as I kind of end my message, I want to give you the opportunity to base your belief on one of two things. I want to give you the chance to base your belief in fear or base your belief in hope. Because who wants to step into a future if you have to fear that future? I'm going to say nobody. But if you knew the future was something that held hope, wouldn't you move toward it? So let's talk briefly in the last 2 minutes about the book of Revelation. Like, what is all that? Like, can I just like I don't know everything about the Bible, right? Like, I can't say I am the biblical scholar that if you came to me and asked me a question, I could give you all the answers. There is no pastor alive who can do that, by the way. There is no one human being alive that can do that. There are some who are experts in certain things about the Bible. Thank goodness that we have them, because we can go to them and say, help us understand. But something I want to offer to you about this concept of eschatology and where does the book of Revelation come into it, something that is really important for you to know is that the book of Revelation was written for people who were living in fear based on the surrounding world that was oppressing them. Like Rome, at that point in time, had began to destroy those who were considered themselves followers of Jesus. Like their lives were on the line. Who they were and their existence was threatened. And they were living in a world where they weren't sure they could vocally, outwardly be somebody who could say, I feel free to let the world know that I'm a follower of Jesus, because they were being extinguished. Go back and look at history. By the time we get to the book of Revelation, God's people are no longer just accepted. I mean, they thought that Jesus was this one who was creating this rebellion. And so when Jesus came back to life and enlivened these people who they thought they had squashed, the world around it said, hold on a second, we are Rome, we are in power, we can't let anybody else threaten that. And so they started to crush everybody who considered themselves a follower of Jesus. There was a lot of persecution. And so the book of Revelation was written to that kind of people. People who were living in fear for their lives, deciding whether I should continue to be a follower of Jesus or not. And the book that's written by this person who wrote it, that's given to them, these words are words given to them to offer them hope. To say, hey, we know it's really scary for you, but please don't give up. Because there's a lot of good that's coming to you from God, who's going to establish authority over everything and all things on the earth. And so most of us, when we get to Revelation, you're like my buddies and me. We're going to it and we're like, where are the really scary monsters in there? Like, where can we find the seven-headed thing that everybody talks about? But if you break it down, hear me on this, if you break it down, Revelation is a series of letters written to churches, terrified, with the intention of replacing their fear with hope. It is not a predictor of what's going to happen. It is a promise. And the promise is, someday, the kingdom that God initiated through Jesus will be brought to completion. And the sin and the sickness and the disease and the hurt and the heartache that you know now will no longer exist. And the option for you is to move in that direction or to move away from it. I want to move toward it. I want to move toward the hope. So today, my offer to you is, can you hold on to hope as a way of saying, fear is not working for me anymore? Stand with me as we pray. God, it's a big word, eschatology, that nobody has to remember or look up. But it is a word that contains a lot of years of people who care about your word, studying what it says and making sense of what are the last things for us. And those last things, God, contain your promise of restoration, the renewal of all things. And we can let a desire to be at that destination be the thing that determines our steps here on this earth. So that if we believe in the promise of good things ahead of us in the history of the world, then we will move toward those good things here and now, just as your son showed us while here with us on this earth. So today, God, as we wrap up ideas about theology, help us understand better what it is that you hope that we will believe. In your name we pray, amen.